Hi YouTube, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on day 3 of my 30 day of YouTube videos. I don't know why I decided to do this to myself. I'm having a difficult time already and it is only day 3, but we're still gonna try and do this. So for today, I have decided, very last minute, to go with unpopular opinions, reselling advice that I hate. I've picked out a few pieces of advice that I've seen frequently that really just grind my gears, and I'm going to try and talk about them with you here without going off topic too much, because I've recorded this video 65,000 times because I keep going off topic. So let's just start with my reasons. Number 1 piece of advice that I hate: don't leave money on the table. This might sound like it makes some sense when you first hear it, but the idea behind don't leave money on the table is like this very fear-based sort of thing that, like, oh, never miss an opportunity to learn something about something that you can make money on. I do think that it's good to be open to new categories of inventory or new streams of revenue or new platforms, etc. But you cannot be an expert on everything. When you go to the doctor, there is a reason that there is a specialist for your ear, nose, and throat, or for your feet, or your heart, because you cannot know everything there is to know about the entire human body. So you have to specialize in one area, and that guy's going to be really fucking good at dealing with cardiac issues because that's what he specializes in, right? The same thing with reselling. You may have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things, and that's great, but you may also become very specific about a very small category of things, also fantastic. There is a wide range of, like, jack of all trades where you're probably going to be making less money on things, but a wider range of things. Or you can get really specialized to make a lot more money on a small category of things, you know, and sort of be anywhere in between, right? I think that if you stick with what you are passionate about or what gets you excited, that's going to bring you the most success when it comes to reselling. I specialize in secondhand clothing, primarily vintage, and there are tons of brands that I just don't deal with. There are categories of clothing that I just don't deal with, and there are a lot of categories or brands or whatever that I've dealt with that I don't have personal interest in, but that really get me excited when it comes to reselling. So I've been fine kind of going with what I get interested in. I am never going to be interested probably in sporting goods, right? But there's a lot of money to be made there. Could I go out and learn and all? I could. That's really difficult for me because I do not care. My boyfriend sells CDs, and he has like this bizarre, like, pop culture level knowledge about a lot of things in music. He knows that this producer also worked with this band and this band over here 15 years earlier, and because he worked with that drummer from that band who's also, he knows all this weird shit that is very valuable when it comes to selling CDs, because he can look at something and know that this label is rare, or that they only printed this for a certain number of years, or whatever kind of weird crap he knows about CDs, right? I don't know any of these things, even enough to sort of like use it as an example in a story. And for me to learn that would take probably literal years. And I would be expending all this energy on something that I'm not passionate about, instead of spending all of that energy listing and doing my photographs and sort of, you know, going through and sticking with the things that I really am passionate about. You are going to develop new passions naturally when you're sort of out looking for inventory. And I think that that's often going to be sufficient. If you feel like it's not, you know, pick a time or a day, or, you know, somehow sort of curate your new knowledge, but don't have this vague idea of like, oh my God, I can't leave money on the table. I have to look everything up, or whatever it is, right? I'm going to leave that at that. Let's see. Number 2, never let your emotions get involved. This is bullshit. Usually, this phrase is thrown around when people get upset at a negative situation with a customer, if they've gotten a negative review, if they are getting a return that they don't want to have to deal with, if a customer is, yelling at them, I don't know. But this whole idea of don't let your emotions get involved, it's freaking bullshit, because we are human and we're going to have emotions. And if you are dealing with a new situation that is frustrating or scary or infuriating, you're going to have emotions about it. If you don't know how to deal with it because it's new, you're going to have an emotion. And then you're going to learn how to deal with it, and eventually you won't get emotional about it anymore once you've had the experience under your belt. For me, negotiations used to really get me upset. I got really offended when people would send me messages trying to get a lower price on an item. And part of that for me is just that I feel really uncomfortable with the negotiation process. I felt like a lot of my own personal value was attached to the item or the price or my time, whatever it is, right? It really helped me to figure out how to respond to those situations. And over time, I learned how to deal with them, and now I don't care as much. There are still times that I get annoyed by some of the requests or by the way the requests are sent to me, and that's okay. And I just deal with that annoyance by rolling my eyes behind the scenes, and then I send my professional response to the customer. You're going to have emotions, and if you pay attention to what they are and figure out what about the situation is getting you upset, and you learn how to deal with the situation constructively, that's going to serve you way better than just this pretending that you're not supposed to get emotional about things. That's a bunch of crap. It's also really helpful to be able to have a community of other sellers that you can go to sort of get advice from. And I mean actual constructive and helpful advice, not negative, snarky advice, which tends to be in a lot of the Facebook groups. It sometimes can be hard to say, oh, go out and find some resellers to be friends with. I think that if you go into Facebook groups and pay attention to who some of the better respondents are, if you are on Instagram and connected to other resellers, that's really helpful. If you want to send me a message, if you have questions about things, you can always do that as well. Let's see. So, okay, another piece of advice that I really dislike, hold on, is don't be greedy. Chances are you are not selling life-saving medical equipment or food to starving people. So being greedy is very relative. If you are reselling, whatever, we all sell different things, but there's a high likelihood that you are selling something that the rest of humanity does not need to survive. And the entire point of reselling is to make enough profit for you, to survive yourself or to do more than survive, right? This is your job, and somebody wouldn't say don't be greedy if you were working for some company that was going to pay you $600,000 a year to sell insurance, right? They would just say, oh, you've got a good job. It's a cat fight that you just heard there. That was fun, huh? So don't be greedy. Often comes around if somebody has an item listed for, let's say, $50 and they get an offer for $40, and they don't really want to take the $40 offer, they want to hold out for more money. They'll somebody will say, oh, well, don't be greedy, accept the $40 now. You know what, do whatever the fuck you want. If you want to hold out for the $50 instead of the $40, do it. Now, do that knowing that maybe you're going to sit on that item for another 6 months, and was that 6 months worth the $10? Maybe, maybe not. Everybody's business model is different. Everybody's way of handling their inventory is different, and there's a lot of factors that go into that are not just about what the price is. I will just leave that there. I don't like the phrase don't be greedy, because it implies that by holding out for what you think that your item is worth, that's somehow selfish, and that you're not allowed to be selfish in that way. I think it's a phrase that's used primarily with women, number one, which bothers me, but also be greedy. It's your item, you're selling it, you can sell it for whatever you want, as long as you feel like it is worth it to you to hold out for that price, go ahead and do it, because if you get a good price on that item, God bless you, right? That's what we're doing this for. So there's that. Let's see. You need to take returns. I could do a whole separate video on returns, and I will, but for the time being, I will say you do not need to accept returns. There will be an occasion, more than one, most likely, where you are going to have to accept a return or provide some kind of refund for something that's gone wrong. That's just how things go. Does it suck? Yes. Something may be damaged. You may have missed a flaw in something, whatever it is. There's going to be a situation at some point where you may be required to accept a return that you would otherwise not accept, but that's going to be the exception more than the rule. If you decide that you do not want to accept returns, that is okay. Pretty much every platform that I've ever sold on does have some allowance for that, even eBay. They encourage you taking returns. You are not forced to do it, even if your customer opens a return request. But again, that's a whole separate video. Do what's best for you and what's best for your business. I do happen to think that accepting returns is the better way to go. But again, that's a whole separate video for another day. So let's see. More advice that I hate. Let's see. I am not in the storage business, which, probably is accurate, but this piece of advice tends to be given a lot when people have items that have been listed for sale for whatever extended period of time somebody else deems too long. Some people feel like they need to get their items in and out within 30 days, some are 90 days, some are 6 months, whatever it is. Personally, if I've taken the time to photograph it and wash it and write a description and get that thing online and package it up and store it, that shit is staying online until it sells. That's just me. I want to say I have the room. I don't have the room, but I'm storing the inventory. I have the place to keep it. In my experience, things eventually sell. And I don't think it's just about looking at that one item and how much you got for that item and how long you held on to it for. I think that whenever you're selling things, there are a lot of things that go into the equation of what brings you sales. I think that one of the things that helps you get sales is when your shop has a certain number of items in it. So even though this particular item may not be worth me holding on to for 5 years, I don't know. It's possible that the fact that my store has 500 items in it helps me come up higher in search. And sometimes I rephotograph things, sometimes I tweak a description, sometimes I will move something from Etsy over to eBay or back again because all the work is basically done for me. I frequently sell things that I have had for a long damn time. And when I have a lot of listing activity, often that does generate sales for me, but a lot of the time the sales that listing activity generates are really old items. It's not always the things that I just listed that are selling. So when people say I'm not in the storage business, you do have to make personal decisions about how much inventory you're willing to store, for how long a period of time, what do those longer tail items do to you? Do you see that item in your Poshmark closet when you're refreshing, and every time you see it, you want to throttle somebody because how do I still have this thing and I'm sick of looking at it? Donate it and get rid of it. But if you don't care, then whatever, just, it doesn't matter how long it's sitting around for. If you have 8 storage units worth of stuff and you're spending more money to store your things than you are making by selling, that's something to consider. But generally, I think it's not the case for people. I don't know. All right, let's see. I think we're going to go with one more thing. What should I pick? I think this is going to be, I'm going to go with this. So XYZ platform, whatever platform people are talking about, always sides with the buyer if there's a dispute. That's a bunch of crap. And I personally have not had a whole lot of situations where the platform had to get involved in something between my buyer and I, but it has certainly come up, and they definitely have not always sided with the customer at all. I think that, and a lot of times this is going to revolve around returns, and it's one of the reasons why I feel like accepting returns is reasonable. If a customer approaches you with some sort of problem and you are working with them honestly to try and resolve it, I generally think that the platform is going to be able to look at the situation objectively, eBay, Etsy, whoever, right? And sometimes they may side with the buyer. Sometimes they may side with you. I can think of examples for everything. And let's see, my one eBay example, I had a buyer open a return request using item not as described as their reason. I don't remember if I accepted returns in general at the time, but when a buyer opens the request as item not as described, that means that the seller has to pay for the shipping back. I accepted the request because the buyer claimed that I measured incorrectly, and I thought, maybe the only way for me to really know if I measured incorrectly is to get the item back, right? I think she included a photo with the request, but like it was a bullshit photo and whatever. I was like, okay, I'll get it back and then I'll check myself. And then if I did measure correctly, I'll just deduct that shipping cost from her final refund. eBay will not let you do that. And I learned from that experience that once you accept a return request through eBay, you kind of have to follow through with it. Even though my intention was good, I was giving the customer the benefit of the doubt. What I now do is I call eBay before I do anything with a return request to see what the best way to handle it is. And there have been times where eBay has closed a request in my favor because I explain the situation to them and they say, yeah, you know what, that's not really something the buyer can do, whatever. I can't remember what those scenarios are, but that was the one time where eBay decided kind of in the customer's favor, but I had already taken an action, and so eBay was kind of following through with that action. I had sort of a dispute on Etsy once. A customer, an international customer, purchased an item from me, and it did not fit her. She told me that the measurements were incorrect. I knew that they were not incorrect because this was an item of clothing that fit me that I really loved and I really wanted to keep. But I just, I decided to sell it anyway. So I knew the measurements because they were mine. And I think that the reason she was so angry about the whole situation was because it was an international sale. So not only it was an expensive item, she paid shipping, like $25 to have it shipped to her. She would have to pay that same amount or maybe more, I don't know, to have it shipped back to me. And I don't know what happens with customs fees and all of that kind of stuff. She did ask me also to undervalue the item when I shipped it, and I don't do that. So she was angry and she responded angrily. And in my opinion, her anger was just, she was going to be losing money on a thing that wasn't working out well for her, that was expensive. And I understand that. But I also was not willing to eat $50 worth of shipping because she didn't know her measurements well enough to know that this item was going to fit her. Do you know what I mean? Had she been a US customer, I would have just accepted the return and it not been a big deal. But because the amount of money that I would have been out of pocket would have been significantly less. $50 is kind of a lot for me to be out of pocket just over measurements, And in that case, Etsy didn't side with the buyer, but they did kind of, oh, your buyer's really unhappy and you could have done things, and maybe if you spoke to her differently, she would have been happier, and she left me a negative review. But I was willing to accept the negative review because it's one out of how many gajillions, and I felt like the review spoke for itself, and I was confident in my measurements and in the way that I handled the situation. So I had also a situation on Poshmark where a customer wanted to return an item, and Poshmark sided against the buyer. And I've had that happen a couple of times, and I just find that if Poshmark allows you to respond to a case. I always respond to Poshmark, but your buyer can read it. So I respond in a way that, is appropriate considering that the buyer is going to read it. I try to remain objective. I do not express any type of opinion. I don't want to say I don't express an opinion. I don't express any kind of anger. I don't get defensive. I try to stick exactly with facts. The Poshmark case that I'm thinking of, a woman ordered a blanket from me. She did try to cancel the order, but I had already shipped it out. And when she received it, she tried to claim that it was damaged. And she said the box was crushed. I was like, okay, but it's a blanket. So, and then she said that it was wet. And I said, okay, well, number one, I wrap the blanket in a plastic bag for exactly that reason. But also, number two, you can wash it. But I didn't say that. I just said, I'm sorry that the package arrived damaged. However, the blanket should have been protected. There was plastic wrap around the blanket. And I think it's worth noting that this customer did request to cancel this transaction, but I had already shipped the item out. The customer was really mad that I said that, but I felt like it was important for Poshmark to know. In that instance, part of the reason I brought it up is that when a customer returns something on Poshmark, Poshmark eats the shipping cost or covers shipping cost or whatever it is. And because it was also Poshmark's money, I felt it was important that they know that. And they did side in my favor in that instance. Anyway, the important thing here is that not all platforms are always going to automatically side with the buyer. If you remain objective, if you stay sort of detached emotionally in your communications, you can still have an emotion, just express them appropriately beforehand to yourself or your friend. But just remaining super professional. I always try to imagine, like, if I was an employee somewhere, like the Gap, and somebody wanted to return a pair of jeans or whatever, would I be like personally offended? No. Would I be angry? Maybe. If somebody came in with like a sopping wet pair of jeans and said, here, I'm returning these, I might be like, but I would still respond in a way that reflects the Gap. So I just try to pretend that I'm working somewhere else. And how would I respond if I had like a boss and a corporation behind me looking over my answers? I'm rambling at this point, so I'm going to stop this video. I don't even know which version of this you guys are going to get online today. I apologize for all the versions, and I will try to do better tomorrow. I appreciate your time. Thank you for spending it with me, putting up with my BS, and hopefully you will come back and watch tomorrow's video. Thanks, guys.